Hi, Ben.
Daddy?
You want a balloon, Ben? They float.
They all float.
Come here, son. You'll like it down there.
You'll never have to grow up.
Hello. Do you want to play a game?
Let's shoot this straight to DVD piece of shit already.
I was one of those teenage guys who, you'd say hello to, and I was stuck for an answer. At some point when I was around 18, 19, I guess, I was in a community college in Montreal, and I took just on basically a sort of a whim, I took a class in theater and acting. Just in general, I was interested in that kind of buzz you get from performing and acting and trying to inhabit a different person and showing off too, because that is, of course, what Sir Laurence Olivier said acting was about when he was asked. It's about showing off. He's quoted as saying, according to some things I've heard. So I had a small role in a French-Canadian, French-language film called L'Affaire Coffin, The Coffin Affair, which was based on a celebrated murder mystery trial documentary from Quebec, where I played a sort of local rural copper, you'd call it in Great Britain, policier, you'd call it in French-Canadian. And I was fortunate in the people I worked with because I had absolutely no clue what I was doing. The lead actor in the film, August Schellenberg, wonderful Indigenous actor who's now left us, unfortunately, sort of took me aside at one point and instructed me how to work with the camera so I wasn't making huge dramatic gestures with the camera right in front of my face. I'll be eternally grateful to Augie for taking me under his wing that way. So that was the first experience. I had a few other bit parts in Montreal.
Roses are red, violets are blue. One is dead, and so are you?
No! No! Get away! Get away! Get away! No! No! Ah! 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 Get away! No! No! Ah! Ah! No! No!
I had just really been fired off a project called Ticket to Heaven, a Canadian film. I'd done a wonderful audition for it, if I dare say so myself, been cast in one of the plum roles, and then proceeded to do an absolute faceplant, crash and burn on the set. Again, I had very little experience. There's a lot of craft involved in performing in front of the camera. And really the only way to get that experience is by doing it. And I had very little experience. I was just sort of in over my head. So the director had to very gently remove me from that film. But within a week or so of that, tough experience, I got offered this role in My Bloody Valentine, which was produced by a Montreal producer who'd sold the concept to Paramount. I was never a fan of the horror movie genre, so I didn't really have misgivings about I read the script, and I could see that, I was aware of the genre of let's call them in the vernacular, slasher pictures, of which quite a few were being made in Canada in that day, thanks to some rather lavish tax breaks the government was offering. It had a number of interesting features. Obviously, the idea that it was set in the mine, rather unusual to say the least, and very, very ambitious. And I think, too, jumping ahead a bit, I think that's probably one of the reasons why the film has continued to enjoy popularity and or notoriety that it has, or a hardcore following. I was astonished when I found out that the film enjoyed the kind of cult status that it has come to enjoy. I left acting in 1985. I went to film school at UCLA in Los Angeles. From there, I graduated and worked a little bit in live action, but not very much. But I gravitated into animated film, and I ended up working on The Simpsons for the better part of a decade. My colleagues, co-students and what have you at UCLA, a lot of them were aware that I acted in a slasher picture, and it was sort of like interesting to them, and I ended up working on a bunch of my colleagues' films, doing little character bits and stuff like that, which was fun to do, and there was no pressure. While I was working on The Simpsons, there was a punk rock group working in Los Angeles called My Bloody Valentine. They were an Anglo-Irish group of young musicians, punk musicians. I think they were working, and I'd always assumed that they were fans of the film, and named their group after the film. And apparently not. I was sort of informed the other day that no, they'd arrived at that name themselves without being aware that there was what I considered an obscure Canadian horror film of the same name. I think it was the bloody, that old British qualifier that they latched onto.
Dave is dead. Somebody's killed her. It's Harry Warden. He's here. Everybody get the fuck out. Go! 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 Let's go. Come on! Oh, son of a bitch must have cut the phone lines.
We were all kids. I think, I was 25. I think the youngest cast member was 19, 20. Kids, and this was a bit of a lark. We were getting to make a movie. Most of us, Paul Kelman, I think, had more experience than the rest of us, the guy playing the lead, TJ. But we got along pretty well. I think Paul Kelman considered me a bit of a pain in the rear end sometimes, because I always wanted to rehearse. Whereas I think he was a believer in look, we'll deal with it when we deal with it. Let's not over-rehearse. So that's the one thing I remember. And looking back on it, he was right. You can rehearse something right into the ground. If you'd been a fly on the wall and during the shoot, you would have heard as much French spoken as English. Half the crew was from Montreal. And Rodney Gibbons, who is a gentleman originating from Great Britain, always spoke French with his film crew, and George spoke French. So it was a very Canadian production in to that extent, with things flying around in both official languages. I always made a point of speaking French with with the crew. The film was sold to Paramount. We would be shooting in an operating mine. In point of fact, it wasn't an operating mine. It was Princess Mine, which was a mine museum. It had recently closed down. Local authorities or something who were operating the mine agreed to give the filmmakers full-time use. There were a number of scenes that were shot in studio, especially towards the end of the film where the reveal happens. So I would say, I'm not an authority on this, I would say that 90% approximately of the mining underground content was shot in the mine, in the Princess Mine, and the remainder was shot on set. And that's what gives the film, I think, its grit, its sense of authenticity, and which was not easy to achieve. Rodney Gibbons, I mentioned Rodney, the director of photography, was unable to use the usual lighting elements and technologies and the lamps and what have you because of the danger of methane explosions underground. Believe it or not, you could only use a certain kind of low amperage lighting. He managed to pull it off, and there were no explosions. So getting all the lighting equipment and the camera equipment and the cast and the crew from the top of the cage, as they called it, to the pit head area was a process in and of itself, and then getting everybody out at the end of every working day. There was a reunion, a cast and crew reunion about 12, 14 years ago in Toronto on Valentine's Day. We came out or got invited out. And, we were astonished at the level of interest, and the screening sold out. And we had people traveling from, in some cases, hundreds of miles away from the United States and parts of Canada to come for the screening. I think at that point we started to realize, and then you heard reports that it started to crystallize for us that this film was still sticking around and still meant a great deal. But it's just quite astonishing. And I think that applies as well to the director, George Mahalka, as to the other cast members. You know, we've lost 3 cast members who are gone now, but the rest of us still get together and stay in touch and enjoy each other's company enormously.